The moment my stepmother Patricia walked into my apartment that Tuesday afternoon, I knew something unusual was about to happen. She had that look on her face, the one that always preceded her most creative ideas. I was 23 years old, fresh out of college, working my first real job at an accounting firm and living in a modest studio apartment in the suburbs of Denver. Life was predictable, maybe even boring, but it was mine. Patricia wasn't just my stepmother. She had married my father when I was 17, right after my mom passed away from cancer. I'll be honest, I resented her at first. Nobody could replace Mom. But Patricia never tried to. She came into our lives with kindness, patience, and this infectious energy that slowly won me over. By the time I graduated college, she felt more like an older sister than a parent figure. We'd meet for coffee every few weeks, talk about everything from politics to terrible television shows, and she always had my back when Dad got too overbearing about my career choices. That afternoon, she sat down on my worn couch, clutching her purse like it contained state secrets, and I poured her a glass of iced tea. The summer heat was oppressive, and my air conditioning unit was doing its best, but losing the battle. "Marcus," she started, using my full name instead of Mark, which immediately put me on alert. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to hear me out completely before you say no." I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. That's never a good sign. She laughed, but it was nervous. Patricia was 52, with shoulder-length auburn hair that she kept perfectly styled, and she had this way of dressing that was both elegant and approachable. Today she wore a light blue blouse and white slacks, pearls at her neck. She looked worried. "You remember my friend Diane from book club?" I nodded. Diane was around Patricia's age, divorced, worked as a real estate agent. I'd met her once or twice at family gatherings. Well, Diane has been through a lot this past year. The divorce was messy, and she's been trying to get back into dating, but it's been difficult. She's very self-conscious, doesn't trust her judgment about men anymore. Patricia paused, took a sip of tea. "There's this man, Robert, who's been asking her out for months. He's a widower, very kind from what I understand, owns a bookstore downtown. But Diane is terrified. She keeps making excuses, canceling plans." "Okay," I said slowly, not seeing where this was going. I suggested that maybe she needs practice. A trial run, so to speak. Someone she could go on a practice date with, someone safe, who could give her honest feedback about how she comes across, help her build confidence again. "That's actually a nice idea," I said. "Are you going to do it?" Patricia smiled, but there was mischief in it. "No, Marcus. I was thinking you could." I blinked. "Me? Patricia, I'm a guy. How would I going on a date with Diane help her prepare for dating men? That doesn't make any sense." "That's not what I mean." She set down her glass and leaned forward. "Diane needs to practice being on a date, the whole experience. Conversation, presentation, reading signals. But having a man there would make her too nervous, too worried about being judged. I thought if someone could pretend to be another woman, a friend she's meeting for dinner, someone who could observe her and give gentle feedback afterward, it might work." The pieces clicked together in my mind, and I felt my eyes widen. "You want me to dress up as a woman and go on a fake date with Diane?" "I know how it sounds," Patricia said quickly. "But Marcus, hear me out. You're about Diane's height when she wears heels. You have delicate features. Your mom, God rest her soul, you got her bone structure. With the right clothes, makeup, a wig, you could absolutely pass. Just for one evening. 2 hours at most. We'd go to that Italian place across town where nobody knows you. You'd have dinner, chat, help her feel comfortable, and afterward tell her she did great. Build her confidence. That's it." I stared at my stepmother like she'd suggested we rob a bank together. "Patricia, this is insane. I can't just dress up like a woman. I wouldn't even know where to start. And what if someone recognizes me? What if Diane figures it out? Diane has only met you twice, years ago, and you looked completely different then. You had that terrible beard phase." She wrinkled her nose at the memory. "As for knowing where to start, that's why I'm here. I can help with everything. I used to do theater in college, remember? Costume design, makeup, the whole thing. And Marcus, I wouldn't ask if I didn't think you could do this. I also wouldn't ask if I didn't think it could really help Diane. She's struggling, honey. Really struggling. I turned away, looking out my small window at the parking lot below. Cars baking in the heat, a couple walking their dog. Normal life happening while I stood there contemplating the most bizarre favor anyone had ever asked of me. The thing is, I've never been particularly masculine. I was always the skinny kid, the one who preferred reading to sports, who got picked last in gym class. I learned to be okay with it, found my own path, but there was always this quiet awareness that I didn't fit the typical mold. And, if I'm being completely honest, there was something else too. Something I'd never admitted to anyone. When I was a kid, maybe 8 or 9, I found a trunk in our attic filled with Mom's old clothes from the 70s and 80s. Vintage dresses, scarves, costume jewelry. I used to sneak up there when everyone was out and try things on. Not in a sexual way, nothing like that. It just felt interesting, like trying on different versions of myself. I never told anyone. When Mom got sick, those memories felt sacred and private, locked away in a part of my heart I didn't examine too closely. How long do I have to think about it? I asked, still facing the window. The date is this Saturday. For days. I turned back to her. And you're absolutely sure this will help her? I really think it will. And Marcus, I'll be there the whole time. Not at the restaurant, but nearby. If anything goes wrong, if you're uncomfortable, you can text me and I'll come get you immediately. I promise. Looking back now, I'm not sure what made me say yes. Maybe it was the earnestness in Patricia's voice. Maybe it was the memory of those afternoons in the attic. Maybe I was just tired of my safe, predictable life and wanted one story I could tell someday. Whatever the reason, I heard myself say, "Okay, I'll do it." Patricia's face lit up like Christmas morning. She jumped up and hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, Marcus, you won't regret this. I promise we'll make this work, and Diane will be so grateful, and it'll be an adventure." An adventure. That's what she called it. If I'd known then where this adventure would lead, I'm not sure I would have been quite so casual about agreeing. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of preparation. Patricia took off work Thursday and Friday, telling Dad she was helping a friend with a project, which wasn't technically a lie. She arrived at my apartment Thursday morning with 3 large bags and a determination that bordered on military precision. "First," she announced, unpacking the bags on my bed, "we need to figure out your measurements and style. You're slender, which helps. Height is 5'10", yes." 5'9.5", I corrected. "Perfect. Diane is 5'7", and she'll definitely wear heels, so we'll put you in flats or low heels. We want you comfortable, not towering over her." She pulled out a measuring tape and began taking measurements while I stood there feeling increasingly surreal about the whole situation. We spent Thursday afternoon shopping. Patricia insisted on going to stores far from my neighborhood, places where we definitely wouldn't run into anyone we knew. We hit a Macy's about 40 minutes away, and let me tell you, shopping in the women's section when you're trying to find clothes for yourself is a completely different experience. "We want something age-appropriate," Patricia said, flipping through racks of dresses. "You're going to be Andrea, Diane's friend from her old neighborhood who moved away and is back in town visiting. Mid-40s, professional, put together but not flashy." "Andrea?" I said. "Do you have a better name?" I didn't, so Andrea it was. We settled on a navy blue dress with 3/4 sleeves and a modest neckline that fell just below the knee. Conservative, elegant, the kind of thing you'd wear to a nice dinner without drawing too much attention. Patricia also picked out a cardigan, since restaurants always ran the air conditioning too cold, and a simple silver necklace with matching earrings. "Shoes are going to be tricky," she said, eyeing my feet. "You're probably a 10 in women's, maybe 10.5. We'll find something comfortable." We ended up with a pair of black ballet flats that actually felt fine once I got used to them. Patricia also bought what she called foundation garments, which turned out to be a whole educational experience in itself. I won't go into details, but let's just say there's an entire science to creating a feminine silhouette that I'd never appreciated before. Friday was makeup and wig day. Patricia set up a full station in my bathroom, products spread across the counter like an art installation. The key is subtlety, she explained, studying my face with professional focus. We're not trying to make you look like a beauty queen. We want natural, approachable, like someone who takes care of themselves but isn't high maintenance. She started with something called primer, then foundation, working carefully to even out my skin tone. I have decent skin, thanks to mom's genetics, but apparently everyone needs foundation. Then came concealer, powder, something for contouring that involved brushwork I couldn't follow, blush, eyeshadow in neutral tones, mascara, and finally a dusty rose lipstick that she said would complement the dress. "Open your eyes," she said when she finished. I looked in the mirror and felt my breath catch. I still looked like me, but softer somehow. The angles of my face seemed different, more refined. It was unsettling and fascinating at the same time. "Now for the finishing touch," Patricia said, pulling out a wig box. The wig was shoulder-length, a warm chestnut brown with subtle highlights, styled in soft waves. When she fitted it over my head and adjusted it, pinning it securely, I couldn't quite process what I was seeing in the mirror. "Oh my God," I whispered. "I told you," Patricia said, smiling. "You look beautiful, Marcus. Or should I say, Andrea?" Beautiful wasn't the word I would have chosen. Convincing, maybe. Transformed, definitely. The person in the mirror was a stranger, but a believable one. A woman in her 40s who looked friendly and approachable, someone you'd meet for dinner and never question. We practiced Friday evening. Patricia drilled me on mannerisms, voice, posture. She said I didn't need to do a high-pitched feminine voice, that plenty of women had lower voices, but I should try to soften my speech patterns, avoid being too aggressive or loud. We worked on how to sit, how to gesture, how to handle utensils with a lighter touch. "Remember," she said, "you're not performing femininity. You're just being a person who happens to be a woman. The more natural you are, the more believable this will be." By Friday night, my head was spinning with information. Patricia had written out a whole backstory for Andrea. Worked in marketing, divorced 3 years ago, no kids, moved to Boulder for work but visiting Denver for the week. She'd even created a few stories about Andrea's fake ex-husband and her fictional job, so I'd have something to talk about if Diane asked questions. "You're going to be great," Patricia said as she left that evening. "Saturday at 6. I'll pick you up at 5, so we have time to get you ready. The reservation is at 6:30. Just be yourself, be kind, and help Diane feel comfortable. That's all this is." After she left, I sat in my apartment surrounded by women's clothing and makeup and tried to process what I'd agreed to. Part of me wanted to call it off. This was ridiculous. What was I thinking? But another part, the part one didn't examine too closely, felt something else. Curiosity, maybe. Excitement, possibly. Like I was about to step through a door into a room I'd never seen before. Saturday arrived faster than I wanted. I spent the morning nervous and distracted, cleaning my apartment even though it didn't need cleaning, watching TV without absorbing anything. Patricia arrived at exactly 5 o'clock, carrying her bags of supplies and wearing an encouraging smile. "Ready?" she asked. "Absolutely not," I said. "Perfect. That means you'll be careful and thoughtful. Now, let's get you transformed." The process took over an hour. Shower first, then Patricia helped me with all the foundation garments, getting everything positioned correctly. The dress went on next, and she adjusted it carefully, making sure it hung properly. Then came the makeup application, which somehow looked even better than it had during our practice session. The wig went on, and she styled it slightly differently this time, pinning one side back with a small clip that added a nice touch. When I stood in front of my full-length mirror, fully dressed as Andrea, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just a costume. This was a whole different presentation of self, and it felt surprisingly right in a way I couldn't articulate. "You're stunning," Patricia said softly. "Marcus, I mean this sincerely. You look absolutely natural." I practiced my voice one more time. "Hi, I'm Andrea. So good to finally meet you." "Perfect," Patricia said. "Now, phone charge?" I checked. "Yes." "Emergency credit card in your purse?" "Yes." She'd given me a purse, a simple black one with a strap, containing the basics. Wallet with cash and cards, tissues, lipstick for touch-ups, keys, phone. Remember the backstory? I recited it back to her. All the details about Andrea's life. Excellent. Now, the most important thing is to make Diane feel good about herself. Compliment her when she arrives. Be interested in what she says. Laugh at her jokes. Help her feel confident. If the conversation lags, ask about her work, her hobbies, anything to keep her talking. You're basically being the best friend anyone could have on a practice date. What if she figures out I'm not really a woman? She won't. But if something feels wrong, text me immediately. I'll be at that coffee shop 2 blocks away the entire time, phone in hand. Patricia drove me to the restaurant, a place called Bellinate that I'd never been to before. It was in a nice part of town, upscale without being pretentious, with white tablecloths and soft lighting. She parked down the street and turned to me. "You've got this," she said. "Remember, you're doing something incredibly kind for someone who's struggling. That's what matters here." I nodded, took a deep breath, grabbed the purse, and stepped out of the car. The evening air was warm, and I could hear music drifting from somewhere nearby. As I walked toward the restaurant, I became hyper-aware of everything. The feeling of the dress moving around my legs, the weight of the purse on my shoulder, the way my hair moved when I turned my head even though it wasn't really my hair. I reached the restaurant door, pulled it open, and stepped inside. The hostess smiled at me. "Good evening. Welcome to Bellinate." "Thank you," I said in my practiced voice. "I have a reservation for 2 under Collins." She checked her list. "Ah yes, your friend hasn't arrived yet. Would you like to be seated or wait?" "I'll wait, thanks." I stood near the entrance, trying to look casual, and that's when the full reality of what I was doing hit me. I was standing in a public restaurant dressed as a woman, about to have dinner with someone who had no idea who I really was. My heart hammered in my chest. Then the door opened, and Diane walked in. I'd seen Diane before at family gatherings, but always in casual settings. Tonight, she'd clearly made an effort. She wore a burgundy dress that looked lovely on her. Her blonde hair was styled, and she'd done her makeup carefully. She also looked absolutely terrified. Our eyes met, and I saw her expression shift to confusion. She didn't recognize me, which was exactly what we wanted. "Diane," I said, stepping forward with a smile. "I'm Andrea. So wonderful to finally meet you in person." Understanding dawned on her face. Patricia had told Diane she'd arranged for her friend Andrea to meet her for practice dinner, someone supportive and kind who would help her feel more comfortable about dating again. "Andrea," Diane said, relief flooding her voice. "Oh, thank you so much for doing this. Patricia said you were wonderful, and I'm just so nervous about everything." "Don't be nervous at all," I said, touching her arm gently like I'd seen Patricia do 100 times. "We're just going to have a nice dinner and chat. No pressure whatsoever." The hostess seated us at a corner table with good lighting, but not too exposed. Perfect. As we settled in and opened our menus, I could see Diane starting to relax slightly. "Patricia didn't tell me much about you," Diane said. "She just said you were an old friend who understood what it's like to navigate dating after a difficult marriage." I launched into Andrea's backstory, talking about the fictional divorce, the move to Boulder, how hard it was to start over. Diane nodded along, clearly relating to every word. "That's exactly it," she said. "Everyone says just get back out there, like it's so simple. But when you've been hurt, when your trust has been broken, it feels impossible." "I understand completely," I said, and surprisingly I did. Even though I'd never been married or divorced, I understood the fear of being vulnerable. "But you're taking steps. You're here tonight. That takes courage." Diane smiled, and I saw some of the tension leave her shoulders. The server came to take our orders. I'd practiced this part, knowing I'd need to order something I could actually eat without making a mess. I went with grilled chicken and vegetables, something simple. Diane ordered pasta. As we waited for our food, we talked. Really talked. Diane told me about her real estate business, about her 2 grown sons who lived out of state, about her elderly mother, who she visited every week. She talked about the loneliness after the divorce, how the house felt too big and too quiet, how she'd started gardening just to have something living to take care of. I found myself genuinely interested. genuinely caring about this woman's story. I asked questions, shared stories from Andrea's fictional life that paralleled Diane's experiences, and somewhere in the middle of it all, something strange happened. I forgot I was pretending. Not completely, of course. I was always aware that I was Marcus wearing a dress and a wig. But the conversation became real. The connection became real. I was being a good friend to someone who needed one, and the fact that I was doing it while presenting as Andrea became almost secondary. Our food arrived, and we continued talking. Diane asked about my work in marketing, and I improvised based on things I knew from my accounting job, translating numbers and spreadsheets into campaigns and strategies. She asked if I was dating anyone in Boulder. Not really, I said. I've been focusing on work, on rebuilding my own confidence. I guess we're in similar places. It helps knowing I'm not alone in this, Diane said. Sometimes I feel like everyone else has figured it all out and I'm just stumbling around in the dark. Everyone's stumbling, I assured her. Some people are just better at hiding it. She laughed, and it was genuine. You're easy to talk to, Andrea. I can see why Patricia thought we'd get along. Halfway through dinner, something happened that I hadn't anticipated. A man approached our table. He was probably in his early 50s, tall with salt and pepper hair, wearing a dark blue suit with no tie, the top button of his shirt undone in that casually elegant way. He had kind eyes and a warm smile. I'm so sorry to interrupt, he said, looking directly at me, but I couldn't help noticing you from across the room, and I had to come say hello. I'm Robert. My mind went blank. Robert. The man Diane was supposed to be building confidence to date. He was here. In this restaurant.
Right now.
Diane's eyes went wide, and I could see panic starting to set in. She looked like she might bolt. I did the only thing I could think of. I smiled at Robert and said, How nice to meet you, Robert. I'm Andrea, and this is my dear friend Diane. Diane, Robert said, his smile shifting to her. Actually, I believe we know each other. You're with Riverside Realty, aren't you? You helped my friend Tom find his house last year. Diane managed a nod, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, that sounds right. There was an awkward pause, and I could see this going badly very quickly. Diane was freezing up, and Robert looked like he was trying to figure out if he'd made a mistake by approaching. Robert, I said, making my voice warm and friendly. Would you like to join us for a moment? We're just finishing up, but we'd love the company. I saw Diane's head snap toward me, confusion and terror in her eyes, but I gave her a subtle, encouraging look. Robert hesitated. I wouldn't want to intrude.
Not at all, I said.
Please. He pulled over a chair from an adjacent table and sat down, and suddenly our quiet dinner for two had become something else entirely. So, Robert, I said, jumping in before the silence could become uncomfortable, are you dining alone tonight, or are you waiting for someone? Alone, he said. I often come here on Saturday evenings. I own a bookstore just a few blocks away, and after a long day, it's nice to have a good meal without cooking. A bookstore, I said with genuine enthusiasm. What kind? Used and rare books, he said, and his whole face lit up when he talked about it. 30 years I've been collecting and selling. It's not the most profitable business in the modern age, but it's a labor of love. I glanced at Diane, who was still frozen, so I kept the conversation going. Diane, didn't you tell me you love reading? It was a guess, but a reasonable one. Most people read, at least something. Diane blinked, then nodded. I do. Mostly historical fiction and mysteries. Mysteries, Robert said, turning his attention fully to her. What authors do you like? And just like that, they were talking. I sat back slightly, still part of the conversation, but letting them take the lead. Diane mentioned a few authors, and Robert knew them all, recommended others she might like. He told a funny story about a customer who'd tried to sell him a rare book that turned out to be a print-on-demand title from the previous year. Diane laughed, and I saw her shoulders relax, saw the real her start to emerge. I became the facilitator, asking questions that drew them both out, making connections between what they were saying, creating space for them to shine. It felt natural, like conducting a subtle symphony. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Our server came by and asked if we wanted dessert. Robert insisted on buying us tiramisu to share, and none of us objected. As we ate dessert, Robert said, "I have to confess something. I've been trying to work up the courage to ask you out for months, Diane. Every time I see you around town, I think today's the day, and then I lose my nerve." Diane's cheeks flushed pink. "Really? Really?" Robert said. "You probably think I'm crazy, showing up at your table like this." "I don't think you're crazy," Diane said softly. "I think you're brave." I felt like I was watching something beautiful unfold, and I was so focused on them that I almost didn't notice when Robert turned to me. "Andrea," he said, "I hope this isn't too forward, but are you in town for long?" The question caught me off guard. "I'm visiting for a few weeks," I said, sticking to the backstory. "Work brought me back to Denver temporarily. Would you be interested in having coffee sometime? I'd love to show you the bookstore, and I have a feeling we'd have plenty to talk about." Time seemed to slow down. Robert was asking Andrea out. Andrea, who was me in a dress and a wig, pretending to be someone I wasn't. I should have said no. That was the obvious answer. "Thanks, but no thanks. I'm actually quite busy. Appreciate the offer." But I looked at his kind eyes and his hopeful expression, and I thought about how he'd just given Diane exactly what she needed by joining our table, by being warm and genuine. I thought about how easy the conversation had been, how comfortable I'd felt throughout this entire evening. And I heard myself say, "I'd like that." Robert's smile could have lit up the entire restaurant. "Wonderful. Here." He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. "The bookstore's address is on there, along with my cell. Maybe Monday or Tuesday if you're free." "Monday works," I said, taking the card with fingers that felt disconnected from my body. "Perfect." He stood up, pulling out his wallet. "Please, let me get dinner for both of you. It's the least I can do for the pleasure of your company this evening." Diane tried to protest, but he was already heading to the counter to settle the bill. When he came back, he shook both our hands, lingering just a moment longer with mine. "Diane," he said, "I hope I'll see you again soon. Maybe at the bookstore?" "Maybe," she said, and she actually smiled when she said it. "Andrea, Monday. I'll look forward to it." Then he was gone, walking out into the evening, and Diane and I were left staring at each other across the table. "Oh my God," Diane said. "That was Robert." "The Robert?" "Patricia told me about him. And he just asked me to come to his bookstore." "And he asked you out." "Andrea, what just happened?" My head was spinning. I have no idea. We left the restaurant shortly after, and Patricia was waiting outside the coffee shop where she'd said she'd be. When she saw us both walking toward her, both smiling, she looked confused and relieved at once. "How did it go?" she asked. "It was perfect," Diane said, giving Patricia a hug. "Your friend Andrea is amazing. And you're never going to believe this, but Robert showed up." "Robert?" Patricia's eyes went wide. Diane recounted the whole story, talking animatedly about how I'd handled the situation, how comfortable Robert had made her feel, how she was actually considering going to his bookstore next week. As she talked, Patricia kept glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Finally, Diane left, promising to call Patricia the next day to talk more. Patricia and I got in her car, and for a long moment, neither of us said anything. "He asked you out," Patricia finally said. "Robert asked Andrea out." "I know. What are you going to do?" I looked down at Andrea's hands, the silver ring on one finger that Patricia had lent me, the painted nails that looked so natural I'd stopped noticing them. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Patricia, this whole thing, tonight, it felt right. More right than anything has felt in a long time. Talking to Diane, helping her, even talking to Robert, it was easy and natural, and I wasn't nervous or second-guessing everything like I usually do. I felt confident. I felt like myself, except I wasn't myself. I was Andrea, and that should be confusing, but it's not. It's just. I stopped because I was rambling and not making sense even to myself. Patricia reached over and took my hand. "Marcus, I think we need to talk about what this means." "I know, but not tonight. Tonight you did something incredibly kind for Diane. Whatever else happens, whatever you decide about Robert and Andrea and all of this, that doesn't change. You helped someone who needed it. I'm proud of you. She drove me back to my apartment, and I went inside still wearing Andrea's dress, still wearing her face. I stood in front of my mirror for a long time, looking at this person who was and wasn't me. The business card Robert had given me sat on my counter, his phone number a string of digits that represented a choice I'd never imagined having to make. I picked up my phone and texted Patricia, "Can you come over tomorrow? We need to figure this out." Her reply came immediately. "Of course. 11 okay?" Perfect. I started the process of removing the makeup, the wig, the dress, all the pieces that had made me Andrea. With each layer I took off, I felt like I was losing something, but I couldn't name what. By the time I was just Marcus again, standing in my bathroom in old pajamas with my face scrubbed clean, I felt hollow. I'd stepped through that door I'd imagined, seen the room on the other side, and now I was supposed to just go back to my regular life like nothing had happened. The problem was something had happened, something significant that I couldn't unhappen. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, and one thought kept circling through my mind. Robert liked Andrea. He wanted to see Andrea again. And Andrea didn't exist. Or did she? Sunday morning arrived with bright sunshine that felt too cheerful for my emotional state. I'd barely slept, my mind replaying every moment of the previous evening. The restaurant, the conversation with Diane, Robert's sudden appearance, his warm smile when he handed me that business card. I got up, made coffee, and tried to process everything. The logical part of my brain kept insisting this was simple. I'd done the favor Patricia asked. I'd helped Diane. The experiment was over. I should text Robert from a different number, pretend to be Andrea, and cancel the coffee date with some excuse about having to leave town early.
Clean break.
Everyone moves on. But every time I started to compose that text, I couldn't do it. Because the truth I was only now beginning to admit to myself, was that I wanted to see Robert again. Not as Marcus pretending to be Andrea. As Andrea. As this version of myself that had emerged so naturally the night before. Patricia arrived at exactly 11, carrying 2 lattes from my favorite coffee shop, and wearing what I'd come to recognize as her serious conversation outfit. Dark jeans, and a simple gray sweater. "How are you feeling?" she asked, handing me a latte. Confused. Excited. Terrified. All of it at once. We sat on my couch, and for a while neither of us spoke. Patricia had this gift for knowing when silence was more helpful than words. Finally, I said, "I want to go on that date with Robert." As Andrea. As Andrea, I confirmed. Patricia took a sip of her coffee. "Okay, let's talk through what that means. First, practically speaking, you're supposed to meet him tomorrow. Do you remember everything we did yesterday? Can you recreate the look on your own?" "I think so," I said. "I paid attention while you were doing the makeup. And I practiced with the wig. I'm not saying it'll be perfect, but I can do a decent job." "All right." Second consideration. The deception. Marcus, Robert likes Andrea. But Andrea isn't real. At some point, if this goes anywhere, and I'm not saying it will, but if it does, you'd have to tell him the truth. That conversation would be extremely difficult. I know. And third, she continued gently, we need to talk about what this means for you. This isn't just about going on a date or helping Diane anymore. This is about something deeper. You said last night that being Andrea felt right. Do you want to explore that? I set down my latte because my hands were shaking slightly. I don't know. Maybe. Patricia, when I was a kid, I used to try on Mom's old clothes. Just sometimes, when nobody was home. I never told anyone. I thought it was just kid stuff, curiosity. But last night, when I was fully dressed as Andrea, when I was talking to people and they saw me as her, it felt like something clicked into place. Like a part of me that had been hidden suddenly got to exist. Patricia nodded slowly. Have you ever thought you might be transgender? The word hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. I don't know, I said honestly. I never really let myself think about it. I'm comfortable being a guy most of the time. I don't hate my body or feel like I'm in the wrong gender all the time. But Andrea feels right too. Maybe more right. I don't have the answers yet. That's okay, Patricia said. You don't need to have all the answers right now. But Marcus, if you're going to explore this, You need to be thoughtful about it. Going on a date with Robert as Andrea when he doesn't know the situation isn't necessarily wrong, but it's complicated. You need to think about his feelings too. I know. But I also feel like if I don't do this, I'll always wonder. What if Andrea and Robert could have had something real? What if by hiding this part of myself, I'm giving up on something that could be important? Patricia was quiet for a moment, then said, "What if we made a deal? You go on a coffee date with Robert tomorrow. Just coffee, nothing more. You see how it feels, if the connection from last night was real or just a product of the unusual circumstances. But if he asks you out again after that, if this starts to become something more than one coffee date, you have to seriously consider telling him the truth."
Can you agree to that?
It seemed reasonable. One coffee date wasn't a relationship. It was just exploration. Okay, I can agree to that. Then I'll help you. But Marcus, promise me you'll be careful. With Robert's feelings and with your own. I promise. We spent the rest of Sunday afternoon in what felt like a crash course in being Andrea. Patricia helped me practice the makeup application again, this time with me doing everything while she guided. She showed me tricks for getting the wig to sit naturally, how to style it slightly differently so I wouldn't look exactly the same every time. Consistency is important, she said, but so is naturalness. Real women don't look identical every day. Your hair might be styled differently. Your makeup might be lighter or heavier depending on the occasion. Andrea needs to feel like a real person, not a costume you put on. We also talked about clothing. The navy dress had been perfect for dinner, but coffee at a bookstore on a Monday afternoon called for something more casual. Patricia raided my closet and found things that could work. A pair of dark jeans I'd bought that were actually pretty slim-fitting, a soft lavender blouse that Patricia said would look great with the right undergarments. Tomorrow after work, you'll come home. Take your time getting ready. Meet Robert at 4, which gives you the late afternoon when lighting is forgiving. The bookstore is called Turner's Books, right? I checked the business card. Yes. I'll look it up tonight, see what the area is like. You should arrive right on time, not early. Confidence is key. By the time Patricia left Sunday evening, I had a plan, an outfit laid out, and a stomach full of nervous butterflies that refused to settle down. Monday at work was torture. I sat at my desk, staring at spreadsheets and trying to focus on quarterly reports, but my mind kept drifting to 4 o'clock. To Turner's Books. To Robert. My coworker Jenny stopped by my desk around 2. You okay? You've been really distracted today. Just tired, I said. Busy weekend. Hot date, she teased. If only she knew. Something like that. I left work at 3:15, claiming a dentist appointment that I'd forgotten to mention. The drive home felt longer than usual, every stoplight a personal conspiracy to make me late. At home, I laid out everything I needed. The jeans, the lavender blouse, the undergarments that would create the right silhouette, the wig, the makeup. I'd bought my own kit Sunday evening, going to a drugstore where I definitely didn't know anyone and trying not to look suspicious as I picked out foundation and lipstick. The transformation took about an hour and a half. I worked slowly, carefully, remembering everything Patricia had taught me. Foundation blended smoothly, contouring to soften my jawline. Eyeshadow in soft browns that brought out the color in my eyes. Mascara applied with a steady hand. The lipstick in a shade Patricia had called Dusty Rose. The wig went on last, and I adjusted it until it felt secure and looked natural. I'd practiced styling it, and today I left it down, with one side tucked behind my ear. Simple, casual, approachable. The clothes fit well. The jeans hugged my legs in a way men's jeans never did, and the lavender blouse had a feminine cut that worked with the way Patricia had taught me to create curves. I added a lightweight gray cardigan and those same black ballet flats from Saturday. When I looked in the mirror, Andrea looked back at me. Not a costume. Not a character. Just Andrea, ready for coffee with someone she'd met at dinner. I grabbed the same black purse from Saturday, checked that I had everything, and headed out the door. Turner's Books was in a historic part of downtown, the kind of neighborhood with brick buildings and tree-lined streets. I found parking about a block away and sat in my car for a moment, trying to calm my racing heart. This was it. Last chance to back out. I thought about Robert's kind eyes, about how easy it had been to talk to him, about that feeling of rightness I'd had all Saturday evening. I got out of the car and walked to the bookstore. The front of Turner's Books had a large window display filled with vintage books and antique reading lamps. A bell chimed softly when I pushed open the door, and the smell of old paper and leather immediately enveloped me. The store was cozy, with floor-to-ceiling shelves, comfortable reading chairs scattered throughout, and soft classical music playing in the background. Robert emerged from behind a counter at the back. When he saw me, his face lit up with that same warm smile from Saturday. "Andrea," he said, walking over. "You came." "Of course," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I've been looking forward to it." He gestured around the store. "Welcome to my kingdom. Not much compared to the big chain stores, but it's mine." "It's wonderful," I said, and I meant it. The store felt magical, like stepping into someone's personal library. "How long have you had it?" 32 years this fall, he said with pride. "Opened it when I was 27 with money I'd saved working construction. Everyone said I was crazy, that bookstores were dying even then. But I figured if I was going to fail at something, I wanted it to be something I loved." "Clearly you didn't fail." "Came close a few times," he admitted. "But we've survived. Now, can I make you some coffee? I have a machine in the back that makes surprisingly good espresso." "That would be lovely." I followed him to the back room, which was part office, part storage area, part tiny kitchen. He had a proper espresso machine, and he moved around it with practiced ease. "Cappuccino okay?" he asked. "Perfect." While he made the coffee, we talked. I asked him about the store, about his favorite books, about how he'd gotten into the rare book business. He told me about estate sales and auctions, about the thrill of finding a first edition hidden in someone's attic, about the collectors he'd met over the years who'd become friends. "Enough about me," he said, handing me a cappuccino that actually had a beautiful leaf pattern in the foam. "Tell me about marketing in Boulder. What kind of work do you do?" I launched into Andrea's cover story, but I'd been thinking about it since Sunday, and I'd added more detail, made it more real. Andrea worked for a small firm that handled marketing for outdoor recreation companies. She'd moved to Boulder because she loved hiking and wanted to be near the mountains. She'd been married to someone who'd turned out to be controlling and emotionally distant, and the divorce had been a relief and a heartbreak all at once. Robert listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions, and I realized that I'd created a version of the life I might have wanted if things had been different. We took our coffee back out into the main shop, and Robert gave me a tour. He showed me sections of poetry and philosophy, shelves of vintage mysteries, a whole area dedicated to travel writing from the early 20th century. "This is my favorite section," he said, leading me to a corner near the back. "Local history. Denver and Colorado in general. There's something about understanding the place you live, seeing how it's changed, that feels important to me." I pulled out a book about Denver in the 1950s, flipping through pages of old photographs. "My mom grew up here," I said, and then stopped because that was Marcus talking, not Andrea. But Robert just nodded. Then she would have seen all these changes. The city was so different then. I could have corrected myself, could have covered the slip, but instead I decided to lean into it. "She passed away when I was younger," I said, which was true for Marcus. Sometimes I wish I'd asked her more about what the city was like when she was my age. "I'm sorry," Robert said softly. "My wife died 6 years ago."
Cancer.
"And I know exactly what you mean about wishing you'd asked more questions. You think you have all the time in the world, and then suddenly you don't." We looked at each other, and something passed between us. Understanding, maybe. Recognition of shared loss. "Is that why you never remarried?" I asked gently. "Partly," he said. "Also, I think I convinced myself that I'd had my chance at love and it would be greedy to ask for more. But lately I've been thinking, maybe that's foolish. Maybe there's no limit on chances, no quota on happiness." My heart was beating too fast. "I think you're right." We moved to a seating area, 2 comfortable armchairs near a window, and we kept talking. The afternoon sun shifted across the floor, and other customers came and went, but Robert seemed content to spend his time with me. We talked about books we'd loved and books we'd hated, about travel and food and music. We debated whether the 1990s or the 1980s had better music, with him defending Bruce Springsteen and me championing early hip-hop. At some point, Robert said, "Can I ask you something personal?" Of course. When you walked into that restaurant Saturday night, you seemed so confident, so comfortable with yourself. But there's something about you, I can't quite put my finger on it. Like you're discovering things about yourself in real time. Does that make sense? It made perfect sense, and it scared me how perceptive he was. I think I'm in a transitional period in my life, I said carefully. Figuring out who I am separate from who I was in my marriage, separate from who people expect me to be. Does that make sense?
Completely, he said.
I went through the same thing after Linda died. You spend so much time being part of a unit that you forget how to be just yourself. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and then Robert said, "Andrea, I know we've only just met, but I feel like I could talk to you for hours. Would you be interested in having dinner sometime this week? A real date, not coffee in my bookstore." Here it was. The moment Patricia had warned me about. One coffee date was exploration. A second date was something more. I should have said no. I should have made an excuse, should have let Andrea fade away gracefully. Instead, I heard myself say, "I'd really like that." Robert's smile could have powered the entire city. Wednesday, there's a French place I love, quiet and romantic. Wednesday is perfect. We exchanged phone numbers, real ones this time. Well, I gave him the number for a phone I'd bought Sunday afternoon specifically for this purpose, a cheap prepaid phone that Andrea could use. As I left the bookstore, Robert walked me to the door. "Thank you for coming today," he said. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," I admitted. "But I'm glad I did." On impulse, he leaned in and kissed my cheek, just a brief touch, but it sent electricity through my entire body. "See you Wednesday, Andrea." I walked back to my car feeling like I was floating. Everything was surreal and hyper-real at the same time. I'd just agreed to a second date with a man who thought I was someone I wasn't, except maybe I was becoming her, except I didn't know what that meant or where it was going. I made it home, locked the door behind me, and immediately called Patricia. "How did it go?" she answered. He asked me out again. "Dinner Wednesday." I said yes. Silence on the other end of the line. "Patricia?" "Marcus," she said carefully, "remember what we talked about. If this becomes something more than casual coffee, you need to consider telling him the truth." "I know. I will. But not yet. Not when things are just starting. What if I tell him and it ruins everything? What if he gets angry or feels betrayed? I need more time to figure out what this is. And what if you keep seeing him and you fall for him and he falls for you, and then the truth comes out and it's even worse because you've built something on a lie?" I didn't have a good answer to that. "Just be careful," Patricia said finally. "And Marcus? I think you need to also figure out what Andrea means to you independent of Robert. Are you exploring this part of yourself because you genuinely feel like it's who you are, or because there's a man involved who makes you feel validated?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe both. Is that okay?" "It's honest," she said. "That's what matters." The next 2 days passed in a blur. I went to work, pushed numbers around spreadsheets, attended meetings, played the role of Marcus the accountant. But every spare moment I was thinking about Wednesday, about Andrea, about Robert. Tuesday evening, Patricia came over to help me plan the outfit for dinner. We'd gone shopping that afternoon, finding a dress that was nicer than the navy one from Saturday, but still age-appropriate and elegant. It was a deep emerald green with a wrap style that was flattering and classic. "Remember," Patricia said as we practiced the makeup again, "you're not trying to be someone else. You're trying to be the most authentic version of yourself. Andrea isn't a mask. She's a possibility." Wednesday arrived, and I called in sick to work. I needed the whole day to prepare mentally and physically. I spent the morning reading articles online about gender identity and expression, going down rabbit holes of information about transgender experiences, non-binary identities, crossdressing as expression versus identity. It was overwhelming and enlightening all at once. One thing kept standing out: The idea that gender is a spectrum, not a binary. That you can be comfortable with your assigned gender and still feel called to express different aspects of yourself. That exploring femininity doesn't automatically mean you're not a man, and wanting to present as a woman sometimes doesn't require a label or a declaration. Maybe I was transgender. Maybe I was gender fluid. Maybe I was just a guy who liked dressing as a woman sometimes. I didn't have to decide right now. I just had to be honest with myself about the journey. By 4 o'clock Wednesday afternoon, I was ready. The emerald dress fit perfectly. I'd done my makeup with more care than before, adding a slightly darker lip color, making my eyes more dramatic with liner and shadow. The wig was styled differently today, pulled back in a loose low bun with a few pieces framing my face. I looked sophisticated, mature, like someone you'd take to a nice French restaurant. Robert had texted Andrea's phone earlier to confirm. Still on for night? 7 o'clock at Chez Michel? I'd replied, looking forward to it. Chez Michel was in a different part of town, more upscale than Bella Notte. I arrived exactly on time and found Robert waiting outside, wearing a charcoal gray suit with a burgundy tie. He looked handsome and nervous, and when he saw me, his expression shifted to something I could only describe as awe. "Andrea," he said, "you look absolutely stunning." "Thank you," I said, feeling my cheeks warm. "You look very handsome yourself." He offered his arm, and I took it, and we walked into the restaurant together. Dinner was incredible, and I'm not just talking about the food, though the Coke oven was legitimately the best thing I'd ever tasted. The conversation flowed even more easily than it had at the bookstore. We talked about everything and nothing. Robert told me stories about his late wife Linda, how they'd met in college, how she'd supported his dream of the bookstore even when money was tight. She used to say that money was just a tool, Robert said, and the point of the tool was to build a life you actually wanted to live. She was wise that way. I told him more about Andrea's fictional marriage, but I found myself pulling from real emotions, real experiences of loneliness, and feeling like I didn't quite fit anywhere. The stories were made up, but the feelings were genuine. "You're different from anyone I've met in a long time," Robert said over dessert. "Most people, they have this guard up, this performance they're doing. But you're just real. Present. I appreciate that." The irony of him saying that while I was literally performing a different gender wasn't lost on me, but I also understood what he meant. Despite the deception about who I was physically, I was being emotionally honest in a way I rarely was with anyone. After dinner, Robert walked me to my car, which was parked a few blocks away. The evening was cool and clear, stars visible despite the city lights. "I have a confession," Robert said as we reached my car. "I'm terrible at dating protocol. I never know the rules about how many dates before you can do certain things or say certain things. So, I'm just going to be honest. I really like you, Andrea. I would very much like to see you again. As often as you're willing while you're in town." My heart was hammering. "I really like you too, Robert." "Yeah." He smiled, looking boyish despite his age. "That's good to hear. Because I was thinking maybe Friday we could do something fun. There's a jazz concert in the park. Very casual. We could bring a blanket. Just enjoy the music." "That sounds wonderful." Robert reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, a gesture so tender it made my breath catch. "Can I kiss you goodnight?" I should have said no. This was already complicated enough without adding physical intimacy. But I looked at his kind face, at the hope in his eyes, and I nodded. He leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to change my mind, and then his lips met mine. It was gentle and sweet and absolutely terrifying. I'd kissed people before, but never as Andrea, never while presenting as someone else. The layers of reality and performance and genuine feeling became impossible to separate. When we pulled apart, Robert was smiling. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. "Sleep well, Andrea." "You too," I managed to say. I drove home in a daze. I'd just kissed a man. Not just any man, but a man who thought I was a woman named Andrea, a man who was starting to develop real feelings, a man I was starting to develop real feelings for. When I got home and finally removed all of Andrea's pieces, standing in my bathroom as just Marcus again, I looked at myself in the mirror and asked out loud, What are you doing? My reflection didn't have an answer. Thursday, I went to work, but I felt like a ghost moving through the office. Jenny asked if I was okay again, and I just said I was dealing with some personal stuff, which was the understatement of the century. That evening, Patricia came over without me asking. She took one look at me and said, "You're in deeper than you expected." I kissed him, I said. Robert kissed me and I let him, and Patricia, it felt right. How can something built on such a complicated foundation feel right? We sat on my couch, and Patricia was quiet for a long time before she spoke. "Marcus, I think we've reached the point where you need to make a real decision. Not about Robert specifically, but about Andrea. Is she someone you want to be sometimes? All the time? How does she fit into your actual life?" "I don't know yet," I said. "Then I think you need to figure that out before you see Robert again. Because right now you're not being fair to him or to yourself. He's falling for someone who might not exist once the wig comes off. And you're falling for someone while hiding a fundamental truth about yourself. That's not sustainable." I knew she was right. I knew the ethical thing to do was either to end things with Robert or tell him the truth. But the thought of doing either of those things felt like tearing something vital out of my chest. What if I told him? I said suddenly. What if I just explained everything? The favor for Diane, how it spiraled, how I've been exploring this side of myself. "You could do that," Patricia said. "But Marcus, you have to be prepared for any reaction.
He might understand.
He might feel betrayed. He might end things immediately. Are you ready for that possibility?" "No," I admitted. "But I'm also not ready to give up what we've started. So I guess I don't have a choice." Patricia stayed for another hour, and we talked through different scenarios, different ways I could approach the conversation with Robert. She helped me understand that whatever happened, I'd been brave to explore this part of myself, and that mattered regardless of the outcome. After she left, I sat with my phone, looking at the text messages between Andrea and Robert. He'd sent one earlier, still thinking about last night. "You're amazing." I typed out a response. "Can we talk? There's something I need to tell you." But I didn't send it. Not yet. I needed to figure out exactly what I wanted to say first. Friday morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. I was going to tell Robert the truth. At the jazz concert that evening, I'd explain everything. Who I really was, why I'd been pretending, what I was trying to figure out about myself. I'd give him all the information and let him make an informed choice about whether he wanted to continue seeing me. It felt terrifying and liberating at once. I went to work, got through the day with actual focus for the first time all week, and came home early to prepare for the evening. Patricia had offered to come help me get ready, but I told her I needed to do this part alone. I needed to own the decision, own the presentation. I did my makeup carefully, trying to achieve that balance between looking like Andrea and keeping it natural enough for an outdoor concert. Jeans again, but this time paired with a soft pink sweater and a denim jacket. Hair down and loose. Minimal jewelry. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who was nervous but determined. Someone who was about to take a huge risk in the name of honesty. Robert picked me up at 6, driving a classic Honda that was probably older than me but beautifully maintained. He'd brought a picnic basket. "I made sandwiches," he said, looking proud and slightly embarrassed. "Nothing fancy, but I figured we'd be hungry." "That's so thoughtful," I said and meant it. We drove to the park where the concert was being held. It was already crowded with people claiming spots on the grass, spreading blankets, settling in with wine and beer and food. Robert found us a spot under a large oak tree, perfect distance from the stage to hear well, without being overwhelmed by the volume. As we spread out the blanket and unpacked his picnic basket, which contained turkey sandwiches, pasta salad, fresh strawberries, and a bottle of sparkling water, I tried to figure out how to start the conversation I needed to have. But before I could say anything, Robert said, "Andrea, can I tell you something?" "Of course." He set down the sandwich he'd been unwrapping and turned to face me fully. "I've been thinking a lot since Wednesday night. About you, about us, about what I'm feeling. And I realized something. I'm falling for you. I know that's probably too fast, too much too soon, but I'm too old to play games or hide my feelings. You make me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years. I wanted you to know that. My heart stopped. This was the absolute worst timing for this confession, right before I was about to tell him I'd been deceiving him from the beginning. Robert, I started, my voice shaking. I need to tell you something too. Something important that might change how you feel. His expression shifted to concern. Are you married? Going back to a boyfriend in Boulder? Because if you are, I'll understand. No, I interrupted. Nothing like that. It's more complicated. Robert, when we met at the restaurant last Saturday, I wasn't there by coincidence. I was there as a favor to someone, pretending to be someone I'm not, and then you showed up and everything got complicated, and I should have told you the truth immediately, but I didn't. And now we're here, and you just said you're falling for me, and I need you to know that Andrea isn't exactly who you think she is. Robert was staring at me, confusion and worry mixing on his face. What do you mean Andrea isn't who I think she is? Are you in some kind of trouble? Is someone making you do something? The jazz band started warming up, sound check echoing across the park, and I realized this conversation needed more privacy than we had here. Can we go somewhere quieter? I asked. This is going to take some explaining. Of course, he said, already starting to pack up the picnic basket. We walked back to his car in silence. Robert drove us to a quieter spot, a parking lot overlooking the city with a view of the mountains in the distance. He turned off the engine and said, "Okay, we're alone.
Tell me what's going on."
Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." I took a deep breath, and then I told him everything. I told him about Patricia and Diane and the favor I'd agreed to do. I told him about how I'd dressed as Andrea for what was supposed to be one dinner, one practice date. I told him about how he'd shown up at the restaurant, how he'd asked me out, how I should have said no but didn't. I told him about my childhood, trying on my mom's clothes, the feelings I'd never examined too closely. I told him about how being Andrea felt right in a way I was still trying to understand. Robert listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When I finally finished, running out of words and courage simultaneously, he sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. "So you're telling me," he finally said slowly, "that you're actually a man named Marcus and you've been dressing as Andrea to explore something about your gender identity, and everything we've done together has been while you were presenting as someone you're not sure you actually are?" "Yes," I whispered. "I'm so sorry, Robert. I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to hurt you or deceive you. I just didn't know how to stop once it started, and I was trying to figure out who I am, and you were so kind and wonderful, and I didn't want to lose the chance to know you." More silence. I wanted to disappear, to cease existing entirely rather than face whatever came next. "Can I see?" Robert asked suddenly. "The real you, Marcus?" I hadn't expected that request. "I'm not wearing any makeup right now, and I have the wig on, but yes, I can show you." With trembling hands, I removed the wig, careful with the pins Patricia had taught me to use. My shorter hair underneath was flattened and messy. I looked at Robert, vulnerable in a way I'd never been with anyone. He studied my face for a long moment, and I watched his expression shift as he saw past the feminine presentation to the person underneath. "You're younger than I thought," he said finally. "Early 20s? 23. And you really don't know if you're transgender or just exploring crossdressing or somewhere in between?" "I really don't know," I said. "All I know is that being Andrea feels authentic, even though she started as a character. The feelings I have when I'm with you are real. The person I am when I'm dressed this way feels more me than I've ever felt. But I also don't hate being Marcus. I'm just trying to figure out how both of these parts fit together." Robert nodded slowly, then said something I didn't expect. "I'm attracted to women, Andrea. Or Marcus. I need you to understand that. If you're a man, if you identify as a man even while dressing as a woman sometimes, I don't know if this can work. I've never been attracted to men. But if you're figuring out that you might be a woman or mostly a woman or something more complicated than the binary we're given, then maybe there's something to explore here. Does that make sense?" It made perfect sense, and it also crystallized something for me. Robert was attracted to Andrea, to the feminine presentation and energy. He needed that to continue. And the question was, did I want it to continue? Was Andrea just a temporary exploration, or was she becoming a permanent part of me? I think I might be a woman, I said, and hearing the words out loud felt like jumping off a cliff. Or maybe I'm both, sometimes one, and sometimes the other. I don't have the language for it yet. But I know that when I'm Andrea, I feel more whole. When I'm with you as Andrea, I feel seen in a way I've never felt before. Robert reached over and took my hand. This is a lot to process. For both of us. I need some time to think about what this means, about whether I can be part of your journey while you're still figuring things out. And you need to figure out what you actually want, separate from me. Because Andrea can't just be someone you become when you're with me. She needs to be someone you're becoming for yourself. Tears were running down my face, probably ruining what was left of my makeup. I understand. I'm so sorry I wasn't honest from the beginning. I appreciate you telling me now, Robert said. That took courage. And Andrea, Marcus, whoever you are, I want you to know that the connection we've had is real for me too. I wasn't imagining it. But we need to take a step back and both figure out what we really want before we go any further. He drove me back to my car in the park, and before I got out, he leaned over and kissed my forehead. Take care of yourself. Figure out who you are. And then, maybe, we can see if there's still something here. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and got out of the car. I watched him drive away, and then I sat in my own car and cried for what felt like hours. When I finally made it home, I texted Patricia. I told him everything. He needs time to think. So, do I? Her response: I'm proud of you. Whatever happens next, you were brave tonight. The next few weeks were some of the hardest of my life. I took time off from being Andrea completely, living as Marcus and trying to process everything that had happened. I found a therapist who specialized in gender identity issues, and I started unpacking all the feelings I'd been carrying since childhood. Dr. Sarah Chin was in her 40s, soft-spoken and insightful, and she didn't push me toward any particular label or conclusion. She just helped me explore. Gender is complicated, she said in one of our early sessions. Some people know from a very young age that they're in the wrong body. Others discover it later. Some people are fluid, moving between different expressions. There's no one right way to be transgender or non-binary or genderqueer or any other identity. The question is, what feels authentic to you? Over multiple sessions, I began to understand some things about myself. I was comfortable with my male body in many ways, but I was also drawn to feminine expression and identity. The label that started to resonate was bigender, someone who experiences two genders. Sometimes I felt fully Marcus, and sometimes I felt fully Andrea, and both were real. Dr. Chun helped me understand that this was valid, that I didn't need to choose one or the other permanently. I could explore both aspects of myself and find a balance that worked for my life. Meanwhile, Robert had reached out once via text. Still processing. Not disappearing, just need time. Hope you're doing okay. I'd responded. Taking time too. Thank you for being understanding. 6 weeks after that night in the parking lot, I got a text from Robert. Would you like to meet for coffee? At the bookstore? I've done a lot of thinking. My heart raced as I typed back. Yes. When? Saturday afternoon? 2 o'clock. I'll be there. I spent that entire week debating what to wear. Should I go as Marcus, showing him that side of me? Or should I go as Andrea, presenting the version of myself he'd gotten to know? In the end, I chose something in between. I wore men's jeans and a button-down shirt, but I did subtle makeup and wore a short, more androgynous wig that Patricia had helped me pick out. I wanted Robert to see the full spectrum of who I was becoming. When I walked into Turner's Books that Saturday, Robert was behind the counter helping a customer. When he saw me, his expression flickered with surprise, then recognition, then something warmer. He finished with the customer and came over. Hi, he said simply. Hi, I replied. Come on back. I'll make us coffee. We went to his back room, and the familiar routine of him making cappuccinos felt comforting. When we sat down, he studied me for a moment. You look different, he said. Not bad different. Just different. I've been figuring some things out, I said. Working with a therapist, exploring what my gender actually means to me. I think I'm bigender. I experience both male and female identities, and they're both real parts of me. Robert nodded slowly. I've been doing my own research, reading about gender identity, talking to people in the LGBTQ community that I know, trying to understand what this might mean if we were to continue seeing each other. And I asked, barely breathing. And I realized something, Robert said. I was attracted to Andrea because of her presence, her kindness, her intelligence. The way she listened and asked questions and made me feel seen. Those qualities don't change based on what you're wearing or how you identify. And while I'm primarily attracted to feminine presentation, I'm attracted to you, the person, not just the costume. Hope bloomed in my chest. Really? Really? But Andrea, Marcus, whoever you are in any given moment, I need honesty going forward. Complete honesty. If we're going to explore this, whatever this is, I need to know I can trust you. You can, I said fervently. I promise. No more secrets. Robert smiled, that warm smile I'd fallen for weeks ago. Then I'd like to try again.
Slowly.
Getting to know all of you, not just one version.
Can we do that?
I'd really like that, I said. We spent that afternoon talking, really talking. I told him about my therapy sessions, about the bigender identity I was embracing, about how I was starting to live as Andrea more frequently outside of just seeing him. He told me about his conversations with friends, about confronting his own assumptions about gender and attraction, about how his late wife Linda had always taught him to lead with compassion. She would have liked you, Robert said. Both versions of you. Over the next few months, Robert and I built something real. Some dates I presented as Andrea, fully feminine. Other times I was somewhere in between, mixing masculine and feminine elements. We had long conversations about boundaries and attraction, about what worked for both of us. I started coming out to people in my life. My father was confused but trying to be supportive. My coworkers were mostly accepting, though it made things awkward at first. Some old friends drifted away, but new ones appeared, people from the LGBTQ community who understood the complexity of gender. Patricia was my biggest supporter through all of it. She helped me build a wardrobe that felt authentic, taught me all the skills I needed to present however I wanted on any given day, and never once made me feel like my identity was a burden. A year after that first dinner at Bellinate, Robert and I were still together. We'd navigated challenges and difficult conversations, but we'd also built something strong. He introduced me to his friends as his partner, using my chosen name, depending on how I was presenting that day. I spent weekends at his place, helping out at the bookstore, slowly becoming part of his life. And Diane? She'd started dating someone too, Robert's friend Tom, actually. She'd been surprised to learn the truth about Andrea eventually, but she'd been grateful for the confidence boost that first evening had given her. One Sunday evening, Robert and I were at the bookstore after hours, sitting in the comfortable chairs by the window, each reading a book. I was presenting as Andrea that day, wearing a simple sundress and sandals, my hair down loose. Robert looked up from his book and said, "I love you." It was the first time either of us had said it. I set down my book and looked at him, this kind man who'd seen me at my most complicated and chosen to stay anyway. "I love you too," I said. He got up and knelt beside my chair, taking my hand. I never thought I'd find this again. Love, partnership, someone who makes me want to be better. You've given me that. Andrea, Marcus, whoever you are in any moment, you've given me that. I was crying, happy tears this time. You've given me the space to become who I really am. That's the greatest gift anyone's ever given me. We kissed, and it was sweet and right and full of promise. Looking back now, I can hardly believe that it all started with Patricia walking into my apartment with that wild idea. One favor for a friend, one dinner pretending to be someone I wasn't, led me to discover who I actually was. Led me to Robert. Led me to Andrea, who wasn't a pretend person after all, but a real part of me waiting to be acknowledged. I still don't have all the answers about gender and identity. I probably never will. But I've learned that you don't need all the answers to live authentically. You just need the courage to be honest with yourself and the people you love. So if you're out there, struggling with questions about who you are, wondering if it's too late to explore different aspects of yourself, I want you to know, it's never too late. The journey might be complicated and scary and messy, but on the other side is a version of yourself that feels true. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, there's someone waiting on the other side who loves all of you, every complicated piece. That's my story. The story of how I agreed to pretend for one date and ended up finding my real self. The story of how Andrea came into existence and changed everything. And honestly, I wouldn't change a single thing.